Look! Up in the sky! It's a bird! It's a plane! No, it's another Rocksteady Batman game in development. Seriously, what is going on over at WB that the only thing they seem to care for is developing Batman game after Batman game? Come on, James Gunn. Whatever happened to those DC Studios video games?
Gaming, gaming, gaming.
Listen, I love The Dark Knight as much as the next guy, but neglecting the rest of the DC Titans as potential for fun and inventive video games has been the cruelest crime of this generation. Wonder Woman, the most iconic female superhero in history, just recently had her long-awaited video game canned. The Flash, the Speedster, has never had his own proper video game, aside from a decent handheld title on the GBA and a side-scroller on a Sega console. But come on, who's really counting those? Green Lantern, he has so much potential for creative and innovative game mechanics involving his constructs. But the biggest neglect, at least in my opinion, has been the lack of Superman video games throughout all of these generations. The Big Blue Boy Scout has had a number of notable games over the last couple decades, but it's no secret that they've left a lot to be desired. Superman 64 is notoriously known as one of the worst video games of all time, and it is still one of the most abused punching bags on the internet to this day. Superman Shadow of Apocalypse is a game that I think is fine. It doesn't do anything remarkable. I have a soft spot for it because it is based on my favorite iteration of Superman, but when you get down to it, the game itself is just middle of the road. Of course, you gotta go in with tempered expectations when it comes to the Superman Returns tie-in game, as it is a movie tie-in game, but I actually think it brought forth some interesting ideas, like Superman not having a health bar, but instead this meter represents how much destruction is being caused to Metropolis and any civilian casualties. I think that's an interesting way to deal with Superman's invulnerability in a video game. He doesn't have a failstate as a result of him being killed or incapacitated, but instead one for failing as a guardian to the city. The rest of the game's mechanics, however, just don't feel very good. Superman's abilities reach incredible heights in power, and he's able to reach speeds faster than the speed of sound, but these abilities weren't implemented in a way that makes for engaging gameplay. So, Soup's reputation of delivering mediocre video games remains consistent. But there is one Superman video game that I don't hear many people talk about, and that is the Xbox exclusive Superman, the Man of Steel, from developer Circus Freak. Could this be the forgotten Superman gems gamers have overlooked all these years? Or is the Xbox's green glow a forewarning for Superman, much like how kryptonite is like Superman's weakness, and Xbox is green like There's a kryptonite joke in here somewhere. I just gotta piece it together. I have a weirdly nostalgic relationship with this particular Superman video game, despite not ever playing it before making this video. That's because I had a poster of it above my bed all throughout the early 2000s. I think I must have gotten it off a Wizard magazine or maybe a Game Informer. I love the classic Superman aesthetics of this game's cover. It has a stylized, hand-drawn comic book look. Superman's costume design is just his definitive look as he strikes his signature flight pose. We can see the streets of Metropolis in the background and the iconic Daily Planet globe. To top it all off, the instantly recognizable Superman font spells out the simple title given to this game, Superman, the Man of Steel. I believe this cover was designed by Paul Anselmi, as he is credited as the lead graphic designer, and I just want to take a second to give him his roses because this box art really left an impression on me. I absolutely love it. But there is one aspect of it that has haunted me for decades. and that is that dreaded "only on Xbox" stamp at the top of the cover. You see, I was a PlayStation kid growing up in the 2000s and therefore missed out on exclusive Xbox titles. And this one really stung because I have always been a massive Superman fan, and video games based on him are few and far between. So this game has remained a mystery to me for the longest. Does it offer anything of value? A compelling story maybe? Or interesting game mechanics that capture the prowess of Superman? Or is it another disaster that we can all have fun bashing over the next half hour or so? Well, I will wonder no longer thanks to the power of tracking down a totally legitimate Xbox and copy of this here video game. Yeah, let's go with that one. But a bit of context before we up and away our way into this game. Superman the Man of Steel was released in 2002 and was developed by Circus Freak. If the name doesn't ring a bell, I don't blame you. They're credited on just 2 games, this one and Looney Tunes Racing for the PS1. But that Looney Tunes game must have been developed by members of the same team before they were officially recognized as a separate studio known as Circus Freak, because these guys actually spun off from Infogrames. And Superman was their first official game as their own entity. They barely lasted 2 years after being founded, which certainly isn't the most promising sign. The Man of Steel was also coincidentally being developed at the same time as another somewhat forgotten Superman game, and that's the aforementioned PS2 and GameCube title Superman: Shadow of Apocalypse, which is based on the renowned animated series. That's something that the developers of the Man of Steel game made sure to highlight in interviews. Their game is not based on a pre-existing animated show or movie. Instead, it's an extension of the very source itself, the comic books. This game directly spins off an ongoing comic book arc at the time, Superman Y2K. We'll get into more story details later, but I'd just like to say that I really dig this. I love when comic book games feel like they're just another day in the life of these well-established superheroes. Neversoft Spider-Man is also great at this. It's never an explicit point that was made about the game's universe, but it inherently feels like it exists within the pages of the Amazing Spider-Man comics, and which is why it'll always be one of my favorite video games. Circus Freak's Superman game wasn't received very well when it came out. It has an average critic score of 44%, but if you've hung around me long enough, you know that I try to find the good in mediocre video games. I'm not here to give you a hot take or be a contrarian for the hell of it, but I'd like to highlight what I think were some ideas that had potential, but just didn't stick the landing. So, with that being said, let's run into the nearest phone booth and soar into Superman, the Man of Steel. Booting up the game will take us into a menu that appears to take place within the Fortress of Solitude. It's hidden within a snowy mountain, and you have a bunch of crystals inserted into alien-looking technology. So yeah, that's where we appear to be. And I think those 2 statues back there are supposed to be Jor-El and Lara? Ah, a bonus menu, huh? Please let there be costumes, let there be costumes, let there be costumes, let there be costumes! Oh yeah, I can't wait to check those out once I unlock a few. Alright, enough touring around. Let's start up the story mode and see what it's all about. The game starts with Lois and Clark taking a leisurely stroll on the streets of Metropolis as the 2 exchange some playful banter, and we get the best name drop I ever could have expected.
You know, if the rocket ship that brought me to Earth as a baby hadn't landed in Kansas,
you'd still have incredible abilities far beyond that of mortal men, but I'd be calling you Bronx instead of Smallville.
Hell yeah, my home city, the Bronx. Suddenly, electricity starts shooting out of thin air throughout the city, and Brainiac drones start to invade Metropolis. This is where we get a callback to the Superman comic arc this game acts as a pseudo sequel to. Brainiac 13 was introduced in that comic run, and Clark fears that these drones may be a sign that he's back, as it seems that they are using the same technology that Brainiac 13 did. So he wastes no time and springs into action. But before we find out how Superman will deal with the harrowing invasion of mysterious drones, The real question is, does the gameplay capture Superman's iconic power set with engaging and fun mechanics? You actually have access to all of his abilities from the get-go, but I want to start with what I think is the most tantalizing superpower of all: flight. Flight controls in this game are actually quite simple. You press down on the right trigger and you accelerate forward. How much pressure you apply to the trigger determines your speed. You steer with the left analog stick as you would expect, and pushing up and down on the right analog stick has Superman ascend and descend respectively. It all controls quite well. I never had any issues with controlling Superman's flight direction. You can also strafe in multiple directions with the right analog stick, and that also felt quite intuitive and perfectly implemented. Now, do the flight mechanics offer an unforgettable experience that captures the thrill of soaring through the skies as this unstoppable godlike being? Not really. For one, your top speed isn't very impressive. I can picture Superman's frustrated face as he clenches his arms, desperately trying to fly faster, but this game's mechanics simply won't allow it.
How does Superman fly faster? I get that he can fly, I accept that. I just want to know how he flies faster. Is it just like more?
Even though this game doesn't allow you to break the sound barrier like you can in the Superman Returns video game, I still think its flight mechanics are more than serviceable. I'd go as far as saying that they're good. Like I said, I never wrestled with their controls, which is certainly the first thing you want to get right when developing some sort of traversal mechanic. You never want the player to feel frustrated when engaging with one of the most fundamental mechanics they will always have to deal with. And right off the bat, I understood the flight controls and they immediately felt like second nature. And not to get ahead of myself, there are some mission design aspects that I think work quite well with Superman's limited flight speed. I also can't go on without mentioning the nice flowy cape physics that utilize the power of the Xbox. That is impressive for the time, right? I remember the Xbox version of the Blade 2 video game had an exclusive trench coat for the Daywalker, complete with realistic fabric physics. So, Xbox just be having those physics, man. I also really like that as you fly around, you can hear that classic sort of whistling sound effect as Superman flies. While Superman's flight controls are pretty good, setting boots on the ground gave me the most jarring 180-degree, completely opposite experience. My god, are his on-foot controls just downright awful. I guess setting your feet on the ground just automatically activates your super speed without any say and you're forced to frantically jet around like a speed demon. God, it feels so unnatural the way he slides around the floor surface. Not that there's ever really any need to be walking around in this game, but Jesus, it's bizarre. That something as simple as strutting around feels so overbearing. Well, alright, now that we have a good grasp on how to get around, let's see about saving the day. I thought this next feature was actually pretty nifty and clever. The game implements Superman telescopic vision by zooming the camera to wherever your current objective is located in the level, at the press of a button. That's actually pretty cool. It's such a seamless way to include an ability I really wouldn't think about including in a Superman video game. You also have this arrow here on the top that's always pointing in the direction you're supposed to go, but actually that's Superman's super hearing, as you can see by those pulsating little sound wave circles. So yeah, they just implemented his super hearing as a passive ability in the form of an objective pointer. Dude, that's really freaking clever. I absolutely love that. Okay, so now we're about to face off against some robots. Let's throw a punch, unlike Superman Returns, and dive into combat. In a weird way, Superman the Man of Steel doesn't really feel like it has a combat system. I never felt like I was engaging in a duel against an opponent. Let me explain. The game implements this system that does its best to incorporate all of Superman's powers in every combat encounter. Super strength, heat vision, and super breath. None of these abilities will ever take a back seat, which I think is commendable. And the way the game does this is by having different drones that are susceptible to one of Superman's powers. And you can tell because each enemy is color coded, letting the player know what their weakness is. Purple drones are weak to heat, green ones are weak to cold, and yellow ones you just have to resort to good old fashioned fisticuffs. I think this is a solid idea because one, what would stop me from just lasering every enemy at a nice cozy distance? And two, I think it's cool that the devs found a way to apply limitations to Superman's powers without including some sort of energy meter. You have access to all of his powers from the get-go, and you're free to use them whenever you want. It's just a matter of whether they're going to be effective or not. However, the issue is that it never felt like I was engaging with this robust or expressive combat system, or simply a combat system that allowed me to experiment or mix things up a bit. I was just playing match the color. I'd fly up to a robot, oh, this is a purple one, zap. Oh, this is a green one, whoosh. And they'd be obliterated in just a few seconds. Even the robots that can only be destroyed by punching them, there's not really a whole lot to dig into. You just tap the punch button a few times and they're donezo. Actually, it can be simplified even further than that because you can also do a heavy punch attack with a separate button, and it takes them out in just a single hit. There's really no incentive to not use the heavy punch since it takes them out in one hit and there's no drawback to using it, like a long charge up period or anything like that. There's no block button either. I mean, like, enemies don't have attack patterns that you really have to be mindful of, so, dodging attacks is never an issue. Enemies are just dispatched so easily. But I guess it does make sense to not have this robust combat system with an extensive moves list and complex combos to learn in a Superman game, right? It's not like he's a martial artist in most iterations of the character. He's not Batman or Daredevil or someone that tends to fight with a bit more flair and creativity like Spider-Man. Superman's power level is through the roof. All he has to do is unleash it upon his enemy and break them. Especially if it's just a robot. I understand having to be more fancy if he's fighting an opponent on his level, like another Kryptonian or an alien. So while there isn't a whole lot of self-expression or challenge when it comes to taking out enemies, the game does present challenges in a different way that I think is very fitting for the character. And the way the game does this is by having a sequence of emergency scenarios that require Superman's response as soon as possible. This is the main theme of the moment-to-moment gameplay. Flying over as fast as you can to stop robots from draining power from buildings, putting out fires using your super breath, getting a hover car out of the tracks before the train runs into it. These are all very classic Superman saves the day type of activities. I mean, you try not feeling heroic after blowing out the flames in a burning building. Especially since the game gives you these super strict time limits that don't give you a second to lollygag. Seriously, you have to be on point when responding to these instances. If you take a wrong turn or second guess yourself, buddy, you better hang up the boots because you're letting Metropolis down. This urgent gameplay goes hand in hand with the combat mechanics I was just talking about, because now you really have to pay attention to what power the robot you're facing is weak to. Because if you're using your heat vision on a robot that's invulnerable to it for even just a few seconds, that can make the difference between saving the day or being a disappointment to both your fathers. And things can get a little discombobulating when there's 8 or 10 robots crowding around you and you're trying to register what color each of them are. I think that's kinda cool. Look, I'm not about to say that this game made me feel like Superman, but the sense of urgency it offers as I'm frantically flying across the city, making sure that I'm effectively using my powers to cut down on the time it takes to take care of one thing so I can have enough time to move on to the next, made it feel like I had this massive responsibility as a guardian to the city. And that's key to not just Superman, but superheroes in general. The overbearing dread that they can't be everywhere at once, yet they put it on themselves to frickin' try to be. And I think Superman the Man of Steel nails that idea, especially when failing any of these tasks forces you to restart the level from the very beginning. Yeah, this was a massive pain in the ass and was the cause of most of my frustrations with this game, but it did lend to the feeling of, man, I really can't mess this up. Because, if the game just gave me a checkpoint every few minutes, matters just wouldn't feel as pressing. With how much every second matters in this game, Superman's most valuable superpower here is precognition. Trial and error is the name of the game. Knowing the set of challenges that are coming your way after failing them a few times and getting familiar with where they'll be popping up so you can already be heading in that direction before the game even informs you via its objective pointer will give you a huge leg up. There are scenarios that I thought made creative use of Superman's powers, most notably his X-ray vision. There were instances where a big generator or something like that would be rigged with an explosive, and it'll be amongst multiple identical generators, and you gotta use your X-ray vision to find out which is the one that has the explosive. Sounds simple enough, but again, the game retains that massive sense of urgency by giving you like 10 seconds to find out which is the one containing the explosive, then use your super breath to freeze the bomb, which can itself take a few seconds. That's awesome stuff, man. There's another part where you gotta trace these power lines that are underground to lead you to a power node, and it can get a little tricky because other power lines will start intersecting or getting close to the one you're supposed to trace, and if you end up following the wrong one, you'll end up blowing up the wrong power node, thus failing the mission. I feel like X-ray vision is a superpower that can easily go overlooked in a Superman video game, and I was quite impressed with the ways they made use of it here. Another power that had an interesting and good feeling mechanics was Superman's super strength when it comes to picking up large objects in the environment. I want to pull this quote from an interview I found from back in the day by Steven Eunice of the Superman homepage website with one of the members of Circus Freak. Here goes. As Superman, they will be able to lift huge objects that will retain their mass. Even though Superman can carry them with his super strength, he will have to carefully maneuver them into place, fighting against their weight and gravity. I have to say that they nailed that idea. Whenever you're carrying a massive object, you can really feel the weight of it as you fly around. If you're flying forward and suddenly pull back on the analog stick, that forward momentum will carry over and you have to fight back and wrestle with the object's incredible weight as you try to place it in a specific spot. To bring up how this game leans into keeping constant pressure on the player, you can find yourself losing precious seconds to complete the current objective as you're struggling to maneuver around with an object. Of course, Superman can perform incredible feats of strength, but it's cool to see that physics is still an element you have to deal with. According to the same interview, fans at the time expressed concern after seeing an energy meter in screenshots, worried that any type of health bar or stamina meter would be a disservice to the Man of Tomorrow. And the game does indeed have a traditional health bar for Superman, but I love the way the rep from Circus Freak responded to these concerns. Even Superman can be staggered, enemies can delay, and even knock Superman out in our game. Both of these will cause Superman to fail in his mission. While I think it would have been an interesting challenge to truly have Superman be invulnerable and unable to be killed or incapacitated, etc., and any fail states would be determined by other means, I can absolutely get behind the idea of simply having a health bar that functions like it does in many other video games. It's really not that deep. We've seen many iterations of Superman that have him be battered around without even the use of kryptonite. I can buy that Superman can be knocked down long enough to fail a task, especially when it's in a video game and you have to suspend your disbelief a bit in order for it to function a little more traditionally. I mean, does anyone call bullshit when Spider-Man or Batman dies in their video games? Yeah, we're talking about mortal characters, but the argument is that that wouldn't be what actually happens in the story. It's not the canon set of events. So while I dig the implementation of time-critical missions, that is the main shtick of the game. You're at 100 for 90% of the game, and man, it gets exhausting. This game desperately needs more slower paced missions that give you some time to breathe in between all the chaos. Give me some Clark Kent investigative missions, or some missions that are simply set in interior environments as I follow a linear structure that I can get through at my own pace. The lack of variety between missions is one of the game's biggest faults. You're cycling through the same 3 or 4 objective types from beginning to end. And to make matters worse, this game's levels don't really offer a change in format that keeps the experience fresh. Despite traveling to settings like the Phantom Zone, Warworld, and the far reaches of space, they're not much more than a simple change in scenery. Which is nice, sure, but you're still flying around doing the same tasks, dealing with the same mechanics, just in a differently themed environment. But while we're here in Metropolis, I gotta say, man, this is an ugly depiction of the city of tomorrow. It's just far too industrial looking. They're going for a futuristic take with flying cars, a monorail that slithers its way through the city, and impossibly tall skyscrapers, but I don't know, it just doesn't have that bright golden beacon vibe I've seen in other iterations of Metropolis. The palette they chose is just far too drab, and I feel like the city is far too congested with buildings. Like, I know it's a major hub like Manhattan and New York City, but damn, I don't know, space these structures out a little more. I get claustrophobic just thinking about living here. I also can't fault the game for this next critique because the tech definitely wasn't there at the time, but it's disheartening not seeing any civilians around. It just contributes to that dreary vibe this version of Metropolis has. There's actually a narrative reason why Metropolis looks like this that ties back to that Y2K comic arc I mentioned before. The comic book introduces a far future version of Brainiac known as Brainiac 13. And at some point in the book, he sort of injects his future tech into Metropolis and turns the city into this dystopian version of itself. So, points to the game for keeping that consistent. So now that I've covered the fundamental game mechanics, let's finally get through the story and see how the Man of Steel deals with the looming threat of Brainiac 13. So, we deal with a bunch of B-13 robots that are draining energy from skyscrapers throughout the city and trying to build some sort of monolith. After that, we approach our best pal Jimmy while he's snapping some pics for the planet and ask him if he's found out any info about the robots.
According to Star Labs, the metal left over from those things is identical to the composition of the Brainiac bots you fought before, when Brainiac upgraded Metropolis and nearly—
I remember, Jim.
I remember, Jimmy. I read the comic book. Superman here is voiced by Jeff Kramer, and I think he does a pretty good job. He leans into like a cheesy take of like, hey, I'm a superhero, and I'm here to save the day, which is certainly not what I was expecting, but it works, you know, it's charming. Without any new useful info, we take off and deal with more B-13 robots causing chaos in the city. I gotta shout out these loading screens in between missions that look like they were drawn by Ed McGuinness, who has an instantly recognizable and distinct style when drawing Superman. He's a very square-jawed, ultra-muscular, and cartoony version of Superman that I really dig. It's like the extra kid-friendly and like the most idealized version of Superman. Anyways, suspecting his greatest foe to be involved in the current going-ons, Superman approaches Lex Luthor and presses him for information. Apparently Lex made some sort of deal with Brainiac 13 last time he was around, but I don't know much about that because, unlike Superman, I didn't read the comic. But Lex doesn't budge, and as Superman flies away, he makes a snarky remark that lets us know, yeah, this guy's up to no good, huh? He's just a little shit, isn't he?
Remember it? I'm counting on it.
In some other part of Metropolis, Brainiac 13 is broadcasting a message exclusively for one of my favorite Superman baddies, Bizarro. He brainwashes Bizarro into believing that Superman is bad and that he is the world's greatest hero. He also manages to break Bizarro free along with a bunch of his clones from the lab in which they were being kept in stasis. Look at this freaking goober. I love when Bizarro is included in anything, especially when it's the goofier, dumb as a bag of hammers take on Bizarro. He adds so much levity while also being a very formidable opponent for Superman. So with Bizarro and his clones now flying around the city, we're introduced to a new enemy type. I was keen to find out what new challenges these guys brought to the table and how they can potentially make combat a little more interesting, because the whole match the power to the right color tactic against the robots was already getting stale by this point. When you approach a clone for the first time, the game presents a text box giving the player a tip stating that the clones are vulnerable to Superman's melee attacks when they are flexing. So, time your attacks for maximum effectiveness. I thought this was a simple yet effective way to mix up combat. Up until this point, looking out for specific animations from enemies just wasn't a thing. I was just approaching robots and dispatching them in less than a second without a second thought. Taking the time to look out for this flexing animation from Bizarro clones, as I have to avoid any potential deadly attacks, could just be the thing combat needed to freshen it up. Unfortunately, while you can use that proposed strategy, it is not needed at all. There's barely much of a difference between just wailing on a Bizarro clone whenever you want and attacking them when they are doing that flexing animation. When I realized that, my excitement completely deflated. Actually, the most effective strategy in my opinion is to freeze the clones in place and then punch them so you don't have to constantly keep up with them and chase them around as they're flying throughout the city. Which at that point, they don't feel much different from just fighting the robots. So after we take out Bizarro's clones and clean up all the messes they caused throughout the city as they try to help, we confront Bizarro number 1 himself. Wait, why is he just walking on air? The following level I thought was a pretty cool chase sequence that has us fly after Bizarro, as he of course just causes a bunch of pandemonium throughout the city. So we have to deal with whatever he tries to break or set on fire. It's like dealing with a baby brother after he drank too much soda. Eventually Bizarro stops flying away and we get into a proper boss fight. But it doesn't offer any interesting gimmick or puzzle-like element you have to solve in order to do damage. It's nothing more than a simple trade of blows. After defeating him, some guys from Star Labs come to pick up Bizarro. I just friggin' love this guy. Hello! The next couple missions have us do some more standard rescues like putting out fires, stopping bombs from going off, and catching sky buses before they plummet to the ground. I gotta say that I really appreciate how easy the game allows the player to grab stuff even while it's in motion. You often have to pick up big satellites, flying vehicles, and the like, and the game has this very generous lock-on system that changes the reticle's color whenever you're in range of an object you can pick up. It's a minor thing to highlight, but in a game where time is very crucial, I can see something as simple as picking an object up being very frustrating because the detection is not all there, so you're like tapping away trying to grab the thing, but just nothing's happening. But here, that's something that always felt smooth and reliable. Up next, we have a seemingly direct confrontation with Brainiac 13. He's within a force field being guarded by a bunch of his robots, so we deal with them before confronting the big guy himself. This is where we use the X-ray vision to trace back power lines that are siphoning energy from Metropolis to keep up Brainiac's shield. We do that a couple times and the shield finally comes down. But as we try to attack Brainiac 13, we come to the realization that this was merely some sort of incomplete manifestation and the threat still looms. So we meet up with our friend Metallo and Steel and he tips us off about some alien technology that may be strong enough to defeat Brainiac. And this alien tech comes from none other than the powerful tyrant known as Mongol. So we go on a deep space road trip to Warworld and leave Metropolis in the hands of Kazam. Arriving at Warworld, we find prisoners that could help Superman in finding the weapon we traveled here for. So we make it our mission to rescue them. But first we have to take out a bunch of turrets and a bunch of Mongols goons. These guys don't really offer anything new in terms of enemy engagement. They function the same as the robots with the way they each have a specific weakness. After rescuing some prisoners, taking out guards, and doing some more timed missions, we ask the prisoners if they know anything about the disruptor Superman is seeking.
Now perhaps you can help me. I seek an extremely powerful device, a type of disruptor that...
Speak no further.
Man, these cutscenes are not terribly well animated, huh? They're not laughably bad, but Superman's gestures are so awkward at times. One of the prisoners points us in the direction of where the disruptor might be, but first, more of the same missions. Take out turrets, take out guards. Thankfully, these objectives aren't timed, so we can breathe a little bit. I should take a second to explain Superman's health system. Like I said before, it functions pretty much as a traditional one. You take damage from any and every enemy type in the game, and in between objectives, you recover a significant amount of it back. So I seldom felt like I was ever in danger of dying, except for a few rare moments where there was a significant amount of enemies. And like I expressed before, this never broke immersion or made me feel like it took away from the character. We don't need to overthink that aspect of the character. Plus, the game over screen isn't Superman dying, he's just a little sad, you know? We then find another prisoner who says that in order to find the disruptor, we have to seek out some stones that will guide us to the location of the disruptor. This next level is called the puzzle, but don't get excited. We don't have to use our noggin at all. All we have to do is follow our trusty objective tracker to a number of different stones that we have to carry to a pre-designated spot. When we've gathered all of them up, the location of the disruptor is revealed to us. We nab it and start making our way back home, but not before getting intercepted by Mongol's warship. He's pissed that we freed the prisoners and he's demanding compensation. This next mission is nothing that breaks the mold objective-wise, but it is cool to have a level that takes place in deep space. It's just such a classic Superman thing. We have to protect the ship carrying the prisoners we freed and destroy Mongol soldiers and their ships. We have another boss fight that's very underwhelming against Mongol's warship. He threatened to annihilate Earth and, well, all we have to do is heat vision his ship to death. Before continuing the story, I want to take a moment to go through all the unlockable suits in this game. Thankfully, getting access to them just requires you to complete missions. There's no collectibles to worry about or bonus missions to complete. Every now and then, you'll get a notification at the end of a mission letting you know that you've unlocked a bonus, and it can very well be a suit or concept art. So, let's check them out. Aw, hell yeah, Golden Age Superman. I love when they include this one. It's not just a texture swap either. He has a different build and his head shape is completely different. These next two are just red and blue color palette swaps. This is lame. It's based on a story from the 60s where Superman is split into two versions of himself. So, I mean, cool reference, but boring unlockable suits. His Return of Superman black suit. And he has a mullet. This is a given. It's like, not having the symbiote as an alternate suit in a Spider-Man game. Superman of the 90s. This one just adds a mullet to the default suit, and honestly, I'm not mad about it. Mulleted Superman is the superior Superman. That's right, I said it! A Kryptonian outfit. This one's a bit funky. Not a fan of the shoulder pads, but I appreciate how different it is from everything else. Post Our Worlds at War. Ooh, this one's edgy. Reminds me of Kingdom Come Superman. Well, I'll be a son of a gun. Here's that suit. I love that he has a broader build and an older looking face complete with the gray on the sides. Chef's kiss. So, those are all the suits. There's also a model viewer where you can view all the NPCs in the game, as well as some concept art. Alright, now back to the story. Back in Metropolis, Metallo confronts Lois and Jimmy, and straight up yoinks Miss Lane from the sidewalk.
Hey, what's with the King Kong fixation? Get over it and put me down right now.
She's being way too calm about this. I was excited to fight a villain of this scale, but to no surprise, I came out disappointed. The first half of Metallo's fight has you chasing him down a street as he causes collateral damage, which we have to then clean up. So it's just more of the same thing we've been doing since the beginning of the game. When we finally face him mano a mano, all you have to do is circle strafe around him and laser his health bar away. Man, what's so frustrating is that you can see the ingredients of a potentially decent boss fight. Metallo shoots these projectiles that do pretty significant damage. So if the boss fight just utilized that in a way where you have to focus and actually put in an effort to dodging these attacks, you know, like Metallo actually having different attack patterns that he mixes up to keep you on your toes, and you have to use this game's, you know, admittedly intuitive strafing controls, I'd say you'd have a pretty decent boss fight at the least. But so far they've all been just so easily exploitable. Rendezvousing with Steel, it appears that he's not feeling like himself and he turns on us. He also has an army of Steelworks robots, thus introducing us to yet another enemy type that are unfortunately easily taken out. So we fly around the city taking out fabricators that are making these robots. We're also introduced to another urgent objective type that I actually thought was pretty cool. Missiles were launched targeting structures of importance in Metropolis, and you have to intercept them before they reach their target. Yeah, it's just another variation of a timed objective, but seeing the missile guide itself throughout the city as you race toward it, hoping that you catch it before it demolishes the building, is yet another very Superman thing. Eventually, we face off against Steel himself, and his boss fight might just be the best one in the game, because it offers something that you have to be mindful of before attacking him. He has this heavy hammer spin attack that if you're careless toward, could actually result in you failing the mission. So you have to be at a safe distance when he's doing this attack, then beat on him when he's on his cooldown. I'm really just scooping up crumbs when trying to find something good to say about this fight. It's still very basic. It turns out that Brainiac 13's nanobots had taken control of John Henry Irons' suit and forced him to fight Superman. We hand over the disruptor to Steel so he can work his magic, and we make our way downtown. Checking up on Lex Luthor to see if he's learned anything new, he lets us know that a bunch of satellites around Earth's orbit are under attack, so we take off into space and take care of that. We then come across Brainiac 13's very own satellite that we have to penetrate and destroy from within, but not before taking out some turrets and drones surrounding it. Once we're inside, I thought this level actually offered a nice change of pace. For one, we're finally in an interior environment with somewhat tight corridors, at least when compared to the type of settings we've been playing in. I think having a few of these kinds of levels between all the open area stuff would have done massive favors towards keeping the game feeling a bit more fresh and interesting. While we're here, we use our X-ray vision to destroy the correct terminals so we can get to the center of the satellite and destroy its core. Destroying the core causes the whole satellite to blow up, so we have to jet out of there all Millennium Falcon style. Turns out Luthor double-crossed us, and destroying that satellite actually accelerated the construction of the Brainiac 13 monolith that'll bring him back. Taking drastic measures, Superman decides to embark on a perilous journey to the Phantom Zone, where he plans to recover long-lost Kryptonian technology that he can combine with the disruptor he recovered from Warworld, so he can stand a chance against Brainiac 13. And Steel decides to tag along to lend a hand. The Phantom Zone is a trippy looking place, and it houses some monstrosities that are no match at all. You can take them out with just a single hit. At this point in the game, this level just felt like a chore. All we have to do is fly around taking enemies out until Steel finds the device we're looking for. When we finally find it, we get a surprise visit from Cyborg Superman, who offers another lame boss fight. Back on Earth, we prepare for the final confrontation against Brainiac 13. The final boss fight is okay, because it offers a pattern that we have to follow in order to do damage to Brainiac. We gotta pick up these power routers to stop the energy flow that's keeping up a force field around Brainiac, and once the force field is down, we have to use our super breath on Brainiac's chest plate, then follow it up with a heat vision attack to the face. We have to do this around 4 or 5 times, and there's a bunch of robots attacking you while you're in the middle of all this, so there is somewhat of a challenging element, but not so much that I didn't fail it more than once. While Brainiac is weakened, we inject him with the combined Kryptonian tech and disruptor, and thwart him once and for all. Or for now, as he insists.
This is not the end. I will be back, and I will be victorious.
Luthor somehow spins the story and makes himself look like the hero to the Metropolites, but Superman knows the truth, and will continue to fight for truth. And justice, too. Perhaps a better tomorrow.
I'll always be here to fight the never-ending battle for truth and justice. Always.
Yeah, the story doesn't really have a satisfying conclusion, nor was it ever an interesting plot to follow. It was just a series of events that Superman cleans up. No mystery, character arcs, or exciting moments to get hyped about, or at the very least amused by. There are interesting gameplay ideas here with those urgent objectives that make you feel like a superhero as you arrive just at the nick of time, but that's all the game has going for it. And after a few levels, it just becomes repetitive and monotonous. It's not the worst game I've ever played. I'm glad that I never hit a progression wall or was frustrated by controls or egregious difficulty spikes. So with that, if the game had some variety with level design and broke up the pace with some slower paced missions where we're on foot in some interior areas, I think it would have bumped up the quality of this game to at least being half decent. But as it stands, there's really no reason to revisit this one. Will we ever get a good Superman game? I guess only time will tell. Hopefully James Gunn is cooking something over at DC Studios to tie in with this whole universe he's putting together. At the time of this video's recording, we're just a few days away from the new Superman movie, which was definitely one of the motivators to get this video out now. I have been curious about this game for a very long time, like I said before. So it's cool to have a little bit of synergy with the movie coming out soon. So yeah, as always, thanks for watching. Special thanks to Sam, Carlos, and the Minor Prophet for joining my membership at the top tier. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.